So, actually I want to now talk about creative aspects of all of these things, and this is partly about virtual labs now and how we can build a relationship of virtual labs, using that as an excuse to build a relationship. And then I am going to transition into telling you things which happen to me because of virtual labs, and try and tell you some of the problems I am solving now in terms of research. And finally, I will end up with a few slides on, therefore, what kinds of things can you do to solve problems around your given context, wherever you are from, and how do you leverage things like virtual labs and TechWeb to try to do these things. In other words, you are starting somewhere, you are in some department, but how can you do things beyond the department, and that is a point. In fact, that is the major achievement, in the sense we broke barriers in IIT Bombay by getting projects like this, which were interdisciplinary and allowed us to tackle other kinds of societal challenges and do other stuff. So, I want to address that point. But first, back to the virtual lab. Okay, to recap, either a simulator or a device which is accessed remotely. So, what are the aspects of education which are involved? So, up till now it is almost like a video game. I am allowing you to take a video game through the net. You are playing a game through a browser. It is as if it is like that. But then if I am serious about the quality of what I am communicating to you, how do I pay attention to pedagogy? And I believe you have already had lectures on pedagogy. So, we will look at some of those related concepts here. And then what does it take for you to ultimately be part of this community, where you can start leveraging the resources around you, your students, your colleagues in other departments, and try to create content in association with us. So, we are flipping this model. That is the point I left you with, which is, in the current phase, it is no longer a case where I will create content and give it to you and you take it. Instead, you will create content and you will teach yourself and you will teach others around you, and all I will do is help you in that process, and that is where we are at. So, what are the issues that you have to pay attention to when you are thinking about lab experiments? Okay. What makes you choose a particular lab in the first place? And where we are going with this is, it is a unique situation where multiple IITs started creating the same lab independently on their own, as simulators, which is a good thing for the student, because I have to take an experiment online and now have options. There are 3 heat transfer labs, maybe IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi, somewhere else. And now I can pick and choose. It is like you visiting a, it is like you watching TV. You can pick and choose which channel you want to watch. You think the content is not accurate on this, or the user interface is not nice here, or whatever, you go there. And we are suddenly now at an interesting point where you ask the question, as a student, what are my best options? And it is almost like social media, which is, the students have already taken content, are giving ratings to the labs which are running, and I can't hide these things. I am showing statistics there, how many students are taking this heat transfer lab from IIT Bombay, how many from that IIT Delhi, and so on. And I am looking at the thumbs ups and the thumbs downs. And an interesting thing happens. If somebody wants to spend a limited amount of time learning a concept, you go to the one which has the highest ratings. And you go watch that concept and you are done. So, we did not plan this, but by itself a unique thing is happening here, which is competition. Different people building the same content and this competition, and automatically there is selection of the fittest. If you go to biology, selection of the fittest, same concept. The best lab is winning out. And then the question comes up, can we add on to that lab? Others saying it is okay, it is a great lab, but I think I can do better. I want to add features to that. Can I add on to that lab? And within a lab, what are the objectives for a given experiment? Again, think, most of the experiments you have done, we were babysitting you. But now if I really wanted you to learn a concept, how should I tweak a lab to teach you a particular concept? How should I design the whole experience? Should it be just a set of cartoons, like I showed you a few cartoons in chemical engineering, or should I build you that flight simulator which is so realistic that you can finally train to be a pilot? How sophisticated should that whole experience be? Okay. So, what is the purpose of it? If the purpose is for me to train you to be an engineer in Jamnagar at a Reliance refinery, then I have to expose you to what it is going to look like. So, maybe virtual reality and then a lab using virtual reality, where you actually see the real apparatus. But if all I am trying to teach you is one 5-minute concept from a textbook, why do I need that complicated virtual reality interface? I can just abstract it out and literally with a small diagram explain the concept to you. I just make it interactive and force you to think about that cartoon. So, there are different ways therefore to deliver content, and that is where you start thinking. And if it turns out that your bandwidth, internet bandwidth is low, and I am trying to push a virtual reality experiment to you, you are never going to have an experience at all. You are never going to download the experiment to have any experience at all, because it is a huge file that you have to download. Okay. So, the actual thing that you now have to worry about is what is the use of this concept, therefore, how do you design appropriately for that, and what is the pedagogical aspects of this. If you look at what lab experiments are supposed to do according to the American Board for Accreditation of Colleges, they list all these things. And you now ask, take any lab experiment that you have. This is a very enriching experience. We went through this. Take any of your lab experiments and ask, how many of these things do we permit? Do we permit, for example, number 5, design, build, assemble? No. Nobody builds a lab experiment here. Do we allow them to learn from failure? No. Can I do the experiment again and again and again and try to ask are my results reproducible? No. Okay. Can I ask you to design your own rig and maybe do it in a totally different way from what's already been done? In other words, be creative? No. Okay. A simple experiment where in the real world, chemical engineering lab, where we have a flow through pipes experiment, and this is a friction factor as a function of Reynolds number, and the textbook says the constant is 16. It takes a student 2 hours to push fluids of different at different velocities, at different flow rates, through different pipes, with pipes of different roughness, to ultimately end up with enough data to go back and calculate a constant. So, we are trying to find out this constant. Our students do it, they get a value of 160. Textbook says 16. You do the lab experiment, you get 160. What should you do? Take a marker pen, erase the 0. No? There is a lot of pressure on you now. Think about it. Your data is not just off, it is really off. And if you go back to that lab instructor and say that this is the data I got and your equipment is all faulty, which is actually the truth. Equipment was not so great.
Not in the laminar region.
I don't know that. I don't know that. I thought I was operating in the laminar region. If you are not in the laminar region, what could it be? But what could it be? Can it be 160? I don't know that. But that's the point. If you were to ask what if questions now at this moment, that's when your learning goes through the roof. What if this assumption was wrong? What if this measurement was wrong? What if this measuring device was wrong? Had broken down. Therefore, I was getting a wrong measurement. What if my assumptions were wrong? But for each of these, you can't simply write down a list of these options and say these are the reasons why we think the experiment is a lousy experiment. And that's why the results are unrealistic. Instead, if you flip it around and ask, if this were turbulent flow, what can I expect? Now, it lets you as an engineer in that field who is designing something for a refinery, ask the question, what might I expect when I see that kind of a pipe pumping that kind of a fluid to some other unit operation, where I don't have the luxury of deciding beforehand that it's laminar or turbulent. What happens if I design wrong? Because there's a huge impact if you design wrong, if you use the wrong equations. If I use the laminar flow equation, then I should have been using a turbulent flow equation, for example. Okay. What is the impact of having a measurement error? Can it explain a 16 becoming a 160? One measurement error somewhere, maybe an estimate of pressure drop. Okay. So, in other words, what's the impact of least count on a calculation? These are questions that you start asking. What the assumption that you got a laminar flow, in what manner are you injecting fluid into that pipe? Why is it that you are assuming that just because you operated a low flow rate that you have laminar flow, and that is what indirectly you are getting at. But then what is an impact, for example, of an entry length into a pipe? And remember when I told you that the MTech students who built all this had to go back and ask, why is it not a 160? When they went back and tried to read through the literature, and at this point you start reading journal articles on this, not just textbooks, you suddenly realize if there is an entry length effect, that can change what is happening. Okay. Which means we are making oversimplifications in what we are teaching. But conversely, that same concept now taught in many different ways. What if this were wrong? What if that were wrong? What if this is not the case? What would happen? And now what is actually a 5-minute concept has become a 15-minute concept, because I have to explain to you all these other possible scenarios, and that is learning. Okay. So don't be in a hurry to take an equation and just think of it one way. There is an x, find the y. In fact, the same experience can be done the other way around. Flip it around, ask something else. If I give you this, how will you estimate that? So one experience can be converted into multiple experiences, and you can broaden thinking to a great extent. We have had issues with obviously the way we evaluate a lab. What is the typical way we evaluate a lab? First of all, there is a pre-viva. Why do we have a pre-viva? We are checking that somebody even read the lab manual. And why is that important to you, that they should read the lab manual? Why? Yeah, that you are supposed to do anyway, but why is it important that you read the lab manual to perform the experiment? That you can get in 2 minutes from your friend. Why do you have to read the lab manual?
That instrument should be like should not be broken or.
Okay, so you are worried again. We are back to that, no? You are worried that because the guy has no clue what he is doing, that he is going to trash your lab. So that is the reason we have a exam before. And because you put in through an experience of not breaking your experiment, what are you forced to do afterwards? Put in through a post test, where you try to get him to explain what he is seeing. It is a total waste of time, because in between you did not monitor what he did. And as we said, lots of time sitting around doing nothing, chit chatting on the net, and you have no way of evaluating therefore an individual's contribution in a team, for example. So the question therefore is, how will you do this, and how will I do this? If somebody is online now trying to take an experiment, should I just quiz him once before and once after? Or given that he is doing it online, and I can actually see or record what actions he is doing, I can figure out what options he has chosen, right? And I can save it in a log file. If I save it in a log file, can I then figure out if he has been clever enough to do it at first attempt, or is he randomly choosing some set points and finally hits upon the answer? I can figure that out also. So do you see where this goes? We can actually have a dynamic way of evaluating somebody because it is online and it is automated. So for example, if there were 10 things to be done in an experiment, you finished one milestone, you chose some settings, calculation number 1 is done, that is milestone 1, I give you 1/10 of a mark. Do the next step, go to the next tab of next page, web page, another 1/10 of a mark. You can keep going. And I can automate this, which means you do not even have to be there as an examiner. And that is dynamic assessment. And if somebody is trying to cheat the system, for example, by randomly choosing set points and doing stuff, I can figure that out by writing some condition and catch those people. So in other words, I can start paying attention to how people are learning from the lab experiment, and that is what I mean by pedagogical intervention here. A webcam was used to monitor what a student was up to, and also to keep track of which web pages they used in this lab experiment. So remember, I have my objective, theory, video, simulator, all these kinds of things. It's an interesting question to ask, in what order did people do stuff? And the guy who wants to get it done quickly is immediately going to the simulator, because he already asked his friend, what set point should I choose? Go to the simulator, choose the set points, done. But a guy who wants to learn will have a particular pattern of behavior. You read the theory, you go to something is not making sense, come back to the theory, read it again, go back there, do something, come back here, you see the pattern, you start seeing a pattern of activity, which I can log. So again, this was just automated and logged. So what she did was then log it, and then each of these. So the first thing here is learning objective. Somebody trying to figure out what the learning objective is. Then spending time on the simulator. Come back to the learning objective, trying to refresh. Is this the thing I'm actually supposed to be doing? Went back to the simulator, and you're seeing the fraction of time in seconds being spent on each activity. What is that pattern? Back and forth. And a very interesting thing starts emerging, which is for somebody who's really understanding what's going on, there's a certain pattern. I'm not saying everyone has the same pattern. On average, you have a pattern. And for somebody who's not understanding what's going on, there's a different pattern. And that shows up in the amount of time spent on an activity and the order in which you're going through things. Why is this important? If you start paying attention to how people are executing a particular task, on what they're spending their time on, and because it's all online, I have the luxury of just keeping a log. I don't have to react to this immediately. I just log what they did as actions in a log file. Later on, I can analyze it and interpret it. At this point, I start realizing that those who are scoring high are following a learning pattern. The way in which they are going back and forth correlates with their marks later on. Clearly, they are learning well. And others who are going through it in a totally different path through the whole simulator are not learning well. Why is this important? Because the moment I realize somebody is going down this path and they've already spent 5 minutes at it, and clearly they are not learning yet some basic thing, what should I be doing? I can actually in my simulator pop up and offer them a hint and say, you might want to go do that instead. So I can make the whole process interactive, and I don't have to sit there and explain the concept. So this is now starting to get a little fancy. Why? Because all I'm saying here is, if I were to monitor the learning behavior of different students, and I can do this brute force now, I can ask 1,000 students to take this, I can evaluate them. So let's say there are 800 students doing well, 200 not doing well. These are your backbenchers typically. No way for you to catch them in a crowd when your batch is 4 at a time. But online, if I know what are symptoms of somebody being a weak learner compared to a strong learner, I can detect that early, and then I can change, because it's an interactive simulator, remember, I can now change my plot. So I have a dynamic, literally a dynamic movie. And you change it and you get them to start doing things, go back, you go spend more time on a more simple concept, don't try the advanced thing yet. Go back, get that concept straight and then come back to this. I can push them and force them to learn better. And this is the future of online learning, especially when it comes to interactive lab instruction. Asking what are trends, what are patterns, and how will you leverage that in your domains to try to get people to learn on their own and learn these things better. Okay. This is a realm of statistics. Those of you more interested in statistics, we can have a brief chat on how you'll actually take all this data and try to actually infer that somebody is a strong learner or a weak learner. Okay, this was something that I described a little earlier, where we have a flipped model. In fact, an experiment done where we now have reasonably large class sizes in chemical engineering here. So one batch of 120 was split into 2 divisions, 60 each. One division was allowed to just watch videos of the course taught the previous year. Don't come to class. Watch the video. This was process control, and remember that gadget I told you about, where you could log into it and then do some experiments. You prove that you have learned from that video by executing that corresponding lab experiment. So in fact, those lab experiments essentially become assignments, online assignments. So now think, you're watching the video on your own time. You want to watch that video at 11 p.m., watch it at 11 p.m. You don't have to come to a classroom. At 12 p.m., after you're done watching that video, 12 a.m., midnight, you then go take the lab experiment. You booked a slot, go do it, 15 minutes, you're done. You read the theory, you do this. Once a week, you come into a class and we'll hold a quiz. That confirms that you've done everything, the theory is straight. In fact, that 1 hour session, that once a week, is not so much a lecture. What is it now? It is more of a doubt session kind of thing, a consultancy by the teacher. Why is this an important experiment? Because as an instructor, if I want to reach out to 1,000 kids, there is no way I can lecture to 1,000 kids and actually monitor their lab experimentation for 1,000 kids. But if I flip this and allow them to learn on their own time, and they have access to the theory and they have access to the simulator, and I am needed only for 1 hour a week for doubts, I can clear the doubts of 1,000 people just the same way I can clear the doubts of 10 people. So as a teacher, my time is saved, but otherwise I'll never cope, because when MHRD says let's increase the intake in IITs by another 20%, we can't cope. We cannot give them one-on-one attention. So this is the future of teaching, because you will flip it. You will find it's your advantage to flip it and get somebody to read. We are starting to see interesting things where some of our students are taking courses online, and I'm sure you have done it as well. Go to edX, go to Coursera, and there are kids who have done these courses and then they are coming and asking for the live course here. So therefore, the live course will run at a higher level, because people already know what they are talking about. The students already know what they are talking about, and now it flips. They are not looking for me, they are coming to me as a live instructor. Why? Not because this is the first time Gyan I am giving them. They are coming to me because they have doubts and they want me to resolve those doubts. They already have the doubts. That is why they are making the effort of registering for a live course. That is also something that is going to happen shortly. And you will not have control over this, because there is a lot of teaching material availability online. And kids will have doubts, and they will come to you with those doubts. And you need a way to deal with that. Okay? So you are moving away from being somebody who is going to take a textbook and just go through a syllabus as per the textbook, to being somebody who is going to have to react to doubts. So how are you going to be in that mode? And that is something that we have seen. And to resolve these things also, we have said you need some access to theory online, you need to have access to experimentation online, and try to learn as much as you can on your own before coming in for an interaction. I should add that this experiment where one division of 60 taught in the flipped way, one division of 60 taught in a regular lecture manner, the performance was the same. Exam performance was the same. What does that mean? If the exam performance is the same, who had the less effort as a teacher? The guy who did the flipped models. Okay. So now to this notion of a community. At some point after I created the first round of content in chemical engineering and later on in other disciplines in the institute and beyond, a quick realization: a lot of people want a lot of content. They come back to me and ask, can you create content? And beyond a point, I am no longer the domain expert in many of these things. And it's also probably not worth my while to create content for everybody. That's not really what I'm here for. I want to do other things as well. I don't want to get pushed into creating content non-stop for everybody. That's problem number one. So I'm not the expert. I need to find a way to get others to contribute. Second, if I create a simulator, and all of you who use software know this is a problem with software, which is in 2 years that software is obsolete, you need the next version of that software. If I create a simulator, in 2 years that simulator will stop working because some operating system changed a version, some library changed, software library changed, and things just stop working. Alternately, people might find bugs in my software and say, can you please come and add, fix that bug or add a feature. So the question is, who now develops an experiment beyond that initial phase of content creation? So I created once, but then am I responsible for fixing everything for the next 5 years? And at this point, there is no incentive for me to do it. Think about it. I mean, why would you make small changes and spend a lot of time going back and fixing something? So we said we need a community of people. So if you look at the more successful software development efforts, it's where there's a community of programmers who contribute a little time here or there and move the whole product along. That's when you're trying to do it for free. Okay, otherwise you do it like a Microsoft. You pay an army of programmers and get them to do it as a full-time job. But if you're doing it for free, we need a community, and so that's where the notion of a community starts. Beyond a point, I'm not the expert and I'm not going to maintain things. So who maintains things? We realized in the Maharashtra zone, we talked of 16 nodal centers, there must have been at least 10 centers which were doing so well that they started creating content on their own, not even waiting for us to encourage them. But they just liked the thing. the whole idea of creating content and interacting with your students that way. And then we realized that we are entirely modeling this whole virtual lab structure wrong. The fact that we are the guys who create content and give it to others is not the smart way for us to do it, because we will never scale. And there's a lot of content to be created. So at this point, this thought came up, which finally is now approved as the current phase of virtual labs, that we get colleges to work with us as partners and create content. Okay. So the broad theme is that independently investigators propose lab. If you think about the process for this, somebody has to first say that, okay, whatever you are proposing as a lab experiment is a good experiment. Just because you said it doesn't mean it's good. I would want 4 or 5 opinions as to whether it is a good experiment to create. In other words, something to spend time on. Okay. So some domain experts have to come up with some content, and then we roll it out in a small fashion. Then for it to finally get packaged in one big bundle of experiments, because there is a quality control issue here. Okay. Different people have different programming styles, different appearances. So who is in charge of quality control, and how do you ensure that you have a good basket of content finally? So that's our challenge now as an administrative challenge. And finally, by the way, who's putting this on the cloud? If everybody has to have access. And by the way, I should tell you, I didn't tell you this, I showed you some stats on the rollout. We've had kids from Africa using virtual labs, writing into us for assistance. We have had companies from China come to us and ask to buy out the whole content already created. Remember, we're giving this away for free, but they actually hope that they're able to buy it out and deploy it in China in their universities. So it's escalating into a nice online initiative where a lot of content is being created. So if you were to try to create a virtual lab, it turns out, and when we went into these 10 colleges and tried to figure out why they were able to do it and others are not able to do it, it turns out there are barriers for content creation. And some of these I heard, getting money from your stuff, getting your principal to give you time to do all these things. So there are barriers. But then, where those 10 places, there was some progress, we realized that what had happened was we already had good relationships with the administration. And administration found a reason to associate with us and to get their instructors to try to create content with us. Okay. Now, the kinds of questions you are asking out there in the corridor, how do I do this, how do I do that, how do I get into a PhD program, how do I get into a postdoc, and so on. You don't have to start there. That's not the only way to get something from an IIT to rub off on you. Okay. Create content, because the whole purpose, are you doing the PhD and the postdoc because you want a certificate of some kind? Because if you ask us what the thing is, and most of the PhDs that we look at, what is for example, an expectation of a PhD? The PhD is more of an indicator that you are an independent researcher. Why is that important? Because all the things you have done up till now have been dependent on some supervisor or a guide. That MTech project had an obvious problem. The problem was that you had to do a project either in 6 months or 1 year. And there's no way you could have tackled a really challenging problem statement because you had an exit date already locked in. You had to finish your project by then. That's not how a PhD works, right? PhD goes on till you solve something or till you have good insight about something. So the question therefore of how do you get into that mode where you associate and then gain value? There are multiple ways that you can gain value without getting locked into thinking the only way is to actually physically come onto campus. And that's what these 10 colleges seem to have figured out in trying to access us. One of the things we have started working on immediately as a consequence of those 10 odd interactions is what's a tool which will at least allow a bunch of people to understand what are the broad do's and don'ts of creating a virtual lab. What are we looking for in a virtual lab? Okay. What are good pedagogical design aspects in a lab? And we are trying to the extent possible, just automate. You cannot automate this. It's not by definition. It's like saying there's only one way to design a flight simulator. That's not true. There are multiple ways to do it. Okay. And by definition, I should not be restricting you in terms of your possible thought processes. If you have different ways of trying to do something, good. That's good for us. Okay. But to the extent that we can give you some ideas, we are trying to create an online tool which will give you guidelines for what goes into this. There are plenty of challenges with this, which is how do I authenticate somebody online? Authenticate, what is the challenge here? If you have done an edX course online or if you have gone to any online course, you register there, If I now ask you to do a lab experiment, what happens? You have to leave that course, go somewhere else to some other website, do a lab experiment, and then come back. How does edX know that you have done a lab experiment and your understanding has improved? They don't. So at some point, and this was that thing I told you at the beginning, it's going to be one nice big online platform. That's starting to be constructed. We are working on that architecture. So what's going to happen? You watch a video of theory, somebody's lecture, 15 minutes of lecture. From there, you'll have to exit that website, go to some other website, because that's where the simulator is running, because I need a server of some kind running that simulator. It's got to be a powerful enough machine. So at that point, you'll take that experiment, you'll come back and remember all this stuff just before that we talked about. How do I evaluate your actions on this? If you're taking this whole thing as an online course, I'll have to also keep track of your marks. And just because you went from one website to another website, I still have to ensure that your marks come back from that virtual labs website back to the course website. So how do I authenticate you? How do I keep track of things? And by the way, if you feel that you had enough for today and you want to pause your experiment and then come back tomorrow and restart it, how do I allow you to do that? That's called persistence. How do you resume? If you right now log into edX, you'll realize that it'll resume. The videos you've already seen are already kind of grayed out. It will show you what's the next set of things you ought to be looking at. How do I resume a task? How do I resume learning? How do you start, stop, start, stop? More, how do you pause and restart? How do you pause and restart? Okay, so that's something that we're looking at. And we're asking, how do I do this entirely using technologies which can be done using a browser? Because now we're asking the question, why is it that we are assuming that people only do this sitting at a laptop? Can they do a lab experiment on a phone and be done with it? Okay, any browser, any interface. So I'm deliberately putting some of this here because for those of you who are really into these kinds of things, there are lots of options. If you had a secret reason why you wanted to learn all about cloud engineering and data analytics, here's a way for you to learn all about data analytics by promising to create a virtual lab in your department. Who benefits? Obviously your students benefit because you created content for them, but you benefited by gaining a skill set which you would have probably not learned in your own department. If you don't have that skill set, what's the smart thing for you to do? Go find somebody in your department with that skill set. So in these 10 odd colleges where these things started to happen, it's not like the people who built it knew what they were doing with programming. So that chemical engineer quietly goes and asks somebody else, will you help me with this and tell me what is this architecture that I need for my software? And by the way, can you divert some of your students from your department, the best programmers, can you get them to come and take my theory and develop a product around it as a simulator? And this is a very interesting thing start happening the moment you get people from other places, other departments starting to look at your problems. Okay, if you pay attention to what's going on around you, you'll realize that this is very feasible for you. The moment you offer to do this, there's ways for us to pump resources into your colleges. The most important resource that we can offer you is our time. Okay. We're not going to literally push money your way. We're not going to push gadgets your way. We're not going to push reagents your way, but we'll give you time. Question is, how will you leverage that time to create something of value for that lab? And
in this case, it's possible to win resources.
yes.
There are resources.
And the TechQuick program, remember, has resources here and also in your colleges.
And we can influence your
And
college.
we have control on the administration to influence them to take up creation of content, because at the end of the day, it's for their own college. They can't refuse. It's for their own students. It's not like you're taking that money and going and doing something totally weird with it. So the smart thing, again, I'm pointing out, the smart thing is how do you therefore leverage all of this to do something on the face of it for your own college? Do that. Immediate benefit number 2, whatever content you create is going to be visible to a larger pool of students beyond your college. More people will benefit from all this effort. That makes it a win-win situation, obviously from whoever is giving the money for all of this, in this case MHRD. Third, if you have been smart enough in this whole process, you have picked up a know-how of all the skill sets needed, starting from your domain content, and I told you, you have to go beyond simple concepts, you have to get into more sophisticated concepts. In other words, make that online experience rich, don't make it like a very simple thing. So make it a complicated experience. Then try to understand the set of technologies that you are going to have to learn about. You may have to learn about programming, scientific programming, web programming, okay, cloud architecture. There's any number of things, depends on your ability to handle things. And then the other thing you will finally learn is about how to manage teams. Teams which are not teams of 4 or 5 people from the same department. And why is that a useless thing to have 4 or 5 people from the same department? Because all of them are pretty much of the same age group, the same learning level. You will more or less have the same ideas, and for that matter you will run out of ideas at the same time. Which is why it's important to be surrounded not by people exactly like you, but by different people, so that you can do different things. Okay, I'll skip some of these things, but these are again some sophisticated features which you can spend time on. How do I randomize this? That's one point, because what is the challenge here? I don't want every student taking my lab experiment online to have the same experience, because then the first guy who does the lab experiment will start cheating and telling everybody else what to do. So how do I make this a randomized experience which makes it a complex thing for somebody to do? Here's the thing, up till now one of the things I'm assuming is everyone is taking a virtual lab because they want to learn. There's always going to be people out there who don't want to learn, who will try to get past that exam system. Now it's an online exam system, they'll try to get past an exam system. So I'm forced to design to kind of deal with that as well in terms of whatever I do. Even with hardware, some of the things we learned were amazing. I had, in my case, the device we built was a bioreactor, a reactor with fluids being pumped in and out and so on, and things being measured. And we allowed for people to control it. It literally was controlled from Delhi during several interactions. And then interesting things happen. In the middle of an experiment, the internet goes down. And your thing is pumping like crazy here. And soon you'll run out of whatever reagent you're pumping. And your pump's not going to do too well after that. So it forces us to think, how do I therefore handle an experience which can suddenly, because of other reasons, can start going bad? How do I shut things down? So literally this is like a train. If you think about a train, if you think of a subway or a metro train here, the driver of a train, by the way, has to prove at all times that he's alive. I don't know if you know this. There's something called a dead man switch. He has to put pressure on a handle, because if something happens to him, he has a heart attack and there's nobody at the controls, you're going to have a major disaster. So it's called a dead man switch, which is he applies pressure on it all the time to essentially indicate that all is well with him and therefore accept the other controls. If this is not done, the brakes will apply and the train will come to a halt. Okay, it's a logical safety measure in a train. It's a logical safety measure in a virtual lab. If I don't see an internet connection active between whoever, the student and the server, and that guy is trying to do stuff on my reactor here, and if I sense that that connection is broken, the smart thing for me to do is to shut down the whole experience and reset it, and not keep doing things, because things can explode here. Okay. And by the way, there will always be a student who will deliberately try some setting, trying to explode my system here, because he's not going to get harmed sitting there, right? So you'll always have that kind of a student, which means you now have to be extra smart here. You have to put down safeguards. Don't let him try this setting, don't let him try. So define ranges in which things can get done. So it forces us to be very creative about how we do this. So the need for restricting the whole experience while giving them some freedom to manipulate things. Okay. So what are the big challenges facing the ministry at this point? There are gaps in the syllabi. We created content, but nobody is pretending that we created content for everybody. We did not create content. We say 1,200 experiments created. That's nothing. There are so many departments. Not all of you are electrical and mechanical and so on. We've had printing engineering, for example, in Pune, and they want lab experiments. We are now getting polytechnics coming up to us and saying make lab experiments. So in other words, the syllabus in theory is huge, and how are you going to create content for all of them? So there's no end to this, and we want people to come forward and create on their own based on what motivates them to create this. The second question that's come up is, who's going to certify the student that they took a virtual lab experiment? I'm not going to sit here and sign certificates. And Professor Patwardhan and Gadre signed what, I don't know, 30 certificates? There's 1 lakh students already taking this. So who's signing certificates? How do you give them certification? So you have to do something like edX. You get an online certificate for having taken an online course. But who is authorized to do that? Is it the university? Is it a ministry? Okay. Who's handling this? And finally, who's financing all this in the longer term? We are still working it out. Right now, it's being run with ministry support, but we are actually told now that we are free to go find other business models for how this will run. Because in the long term, there's an advantage to taking it away from the government, because it will run more efficiently. The government support is needed to kickstart the whole process, and that's been in its own way generous. But just like when TechWhip funds your colleges, the expectation is that in whatever 5 years from now, you have figured out your own R&D programs, you have figured out your own way to get financing, and you're independent of some kind of handout from the government, and that's the longer term game. So how do you run virtual labs with some kind of a public-private partnership in the longer term? It's not so much a worry. Remember I told you the Chinese are willing to come and buy it. So the enough people will come forward to buy these things. It's clear. It's possible to actually get into that mode. So we have created a portal. These are there on your slides. I do encourage you to go look this up. We are creating a community portal which allows you to come in and pay attention to an entire syllabus matrix, because when a lab experiment is created by somebody, we now ask for each university which course is it relevant to and so on. We are trying to create that kind of a matrix. So people get an idea of, we need an index, a table of contents literally. Okay, and that tool that I told you about, which will allow you to get a feel for what might be a good set of features in a lab experiment. So that's now online, and you can learn about good features, bad features. You can contribute, you can set up suggestions, and there's a certain procedure for how you contribute. And what's happening now is we have created our own parallel system to the entire virtual labs, because anybody who wants to initially develop, we say we're not directly going to take whatever content you have and put it on the central server. You come onto our system first, we work with you, you create your content, we polish it up, then we give it to a few people to review. Once the reviews are good, then we say it's now ready to be placed on the central server. So it's a very logical process that's been sorted out. So there are several labs coming up. Again, go back and take your time to go through these things. They're all online anyway. And I want you to appreciate that these are colleges like yours, which are making the effort to upgrade themselves by creating their content. And it's showing up. You know how it's showing up? For a college like PVG, their enrollment of students, Maharashtra, by the way, engineering has not been doing great. 50% of our seats are probably unfilled in the state. The colleges which were doing well with virtual labs creation leveraged that to say that they were creating content in association with IIT Bombay, and their enrollment went up, which in turn means resources coming their way. Some of these places, the management has become smart. They realize that in association with this may mean good things in terms of enrollment, and now it's management placing pressure on faculty to create content. That's not a great thing, because it ideally should come from you to create content, but you can see that there are multiple things which are happening here to this as people realize value in this. Okay, so here's the final, pretty much the more important slide on this, which is the root finally of what happens. When we get expressions of interest, when people upload and say that they're interested in creating content, and we realize there's enough core strength in an area, in a given location to create content, then we go out and hold a workshop. Now understand that it's very difficult for us to go and hold workshops in every college. We can't do that. We just don't have enough people on this. It will never scale anyway. So we go and hold it in the region, and we invite everybody interested to come to that region. And we have managed to get universities to finance this. So we are not paying. We are actually getting universities to do this. And again, things like TechWhip funding being available, we can leverage that to run these workshops. So with these expressions of interest, we then select a nodal center and a coordinator, and then get into actual training efforts on how to use these things. And so in terms of development, this is an old slide. So there were things which are done across several cities, and we are currently, in fact, Feb 5th, we are about to run a workshop in Rajkot. After that in Aurangabad. So now we are starting to perfect this whole how to create content kind of a model. And we go in there and we sit with 30, 40 people, just like this workshop's been held. We go into a zone and we sit with 30, 40 people. And in a 5-day hackathon, literally, remember, you have already given me an idea of which lab you want to create. One of the things we ask you is almost like a movie script. It's like you coming up, we are the producers, you come up and say, here's my idea for a movie. Then immediately ask you, what's your movie script? What is the storyboard? How do you see the experiment unfolding? What are the actions one by one? Literally like a movie script. Once you tell us the movie script and we kind of know you know what you're doing, next question is, how do you do it? What technologies do you have to pay attention to? What are the tricks you have to pay attention to? And the best way we think we do it is rather than explain to each person individually, get everybody into one room, everybody is trying to create their own lab, get them into one room, because within that room at this point you have got a lot of skills. Some guys really know how to program using one software, some with another software and so on. There are a lot of skills there. And for 5 days, just sit down without supervision, just do it. And by the time you are done, at least 2 labs get created. And you have the contacts within this group to find help to complete the remaining labs that you want to create. And that's our model. You will literally pick up 2 themes or 2 storyboards and we'll take it from start to finish and explain to everyone how to do it. So, it's literally like a tutorial. So, that's the broad idea. That's what's going to happen in Rajkot. This is for a whole university there. Okay. And the idea is, in fact, about 50 odd people. It's a residential event, obviously, because it's a 5-day event. 50 odd people at the cost of the university there. So, we are able to influence the universities to now start thinking about investing in this. So, I told you about how I would transition into telling of a more of a research theme. We started with asking the question, how do I create content and then how do I give it to others, roll out. How to create new simulator labs. At some point we have learned that we cannot do it. So, you guys have to do it. And you guys have to find value in doing it, and you guys should find ways to collect resources which are there with your universities, with your colleges, with your principals, and we have a way of unlocking it by putting our pressure on administration. So, the question is, what can you do? The easiest thing for you to do is to create simulator labs. Okay, because at this point all you have to do is to negotiate for time and ask for a collection of students. You know your theory, you know what you want to simulate, find students, find teams of students, maybe across departments if you need programmers and so on, and get it done. And we will sit with you and do this. These are the kinds of workshops I just showed you. But remember what I told you earlier. What is that ideal lab? You walk up to a storeroom and you build content. So, the kinds of negotiations that we are now doing with universities is build these storerooms. You will not have the money to give a storeroom to every college, but you can have a storeroom at a central location in some university, and we will pick and choose people to come up to these storerooms and build gadgets. Because at the end of the day, if all I've taught you is how to build a simulator, it's kind of pointless. So, we're going to get you to build devices. So, that's already negotiated, it's going to happen. And if your university says no, then we'll build them on campus here. We have the resources. The thing is, I'm not the one who's going to come up with an idea of what to build. Because the moment I come up with an idea, you're going to tell me, okay, you complete the building of it with your idea and then give it to us. But that's not the point. If I want to do that, I would do that anyway. The point is to figure out how to get you guys involved in an innovation process. And it's important because the last thing here is about product innovation. So, what happened here in IIT Bombay? 5 years back, when I started building reactors to keep online because somebody wanted to do a lab experiment online, when I got a bunch of programmers to build a simulator and keep them online, I had a bunch of people, mechanical engineers, electronics engineers, software guys, bio guys, nice team. We build the device, then what does MHRD tell us? You shall not commercialize these devices, which is fine, we built it for education. We built a lot of training devices, but for education. But this team is not sitting still. This team is now asking the question, we have a collected set of skill sets, what can we make which is profitable? So, that's what got asked. So, I am going to now address 2 things. One is, what does it take to build a product? What is the way to transition from a training program like Virtual Labs into an innovation effort? And while I am at it, how do I actually solve a real societal problem? Okay. Why am I doing this as a societal problem? Because one of the things that happened to IIT Bombay was we asked, what are you actually solving? The same ministry which gives us money to do all these other things also asks us, at the end of the day, are you solving any societal problem? So, one of the problems, and I coordinate healthcare activities, so one of the problems I was very aware of is that we have a large incidence of cervical cancer in the country. It's a cancer which is caused by a virus. About 1 lakh women in the country die unnecessarily, because it turns out there are cures for this if the disease is detected early. But because most people who get cervical cancer are in rural areas, and this is a woman's disease, and in a rural area nobody is paying attention to women's health, okay, especially in individual households. What it kind of meant was that nobody was paying attention to this problem for that woman, and therefore, if this disease is even being looked at, it's when the disease is full blown, it's a full grown disease, at which point that woman has to come all the way to a Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai. That's the nearest major hospital. And if you look at Tata Memorial Hospital, it's the preeminent, it's the most important cancer hospital in the country, and half its patients come from outside Mumbai. Not even half, actually half of them come from outside Maharashtra. The people who fly down from the northeast to come in to understand what's going on. So, even talking to these people, and I was talking to them about bio of all things, the question they asked was there a way to deal with this disease and a way to reduce the number of cases that they were coping with at Tata Memorial. So, I am being asked to build a solution for a hospital to try to do what? To try to cut down the number of cases being dealt with. So, at this point, what is the research problem? What do you think is the research problem? Because we spent a lot of time, we spent around 3 years working on the wrong problem. I am being asked to cater to a way to solve this disease. Okay. So, this is totally different from what we have been talking about so far. It is a relevant problem, the people dying from it. For some reason, the doctors think that engineers can solve this problem. That is why they are coming to us. Why? What do you think you can do to do this? So, let me explain a little bit about the biology, and then you will start getting a sense. The virus infects a few cells. You know that viruses go inside cells, replicate and all that. That is hopefully school biology which you still remember. And then some of these cells, the DNA gets messed up in these cells, and therefore, slowly these mutations accumulate, and then finally a single mutated cell grows into a clump, starts forming a tumor. An early sign of this is that you see what is called a lesion. You can see a cut on the wall of the cervix. Much later, you will have a huge mass and there is a lot of bleeding and this and that, and at that point it is a major issue. Surgery is called for. So, there were way too many surgeries being demanded at Tata Memorial. So, they are asking for help with the surgeries. So, we worked on solutions to help them with the surgeries. At some point, the thought came up, even if I help them to operate twice as fast at a Tata Memorial, you are not doing anything, because what numbers are affected with this disease? 1 lakh dying. So, slow disease, people do not die quickly, it is cancer, and you are familiar that cancer is a longish disease typically. So, numbers are horrible out there, and we, by the way, in India have more than half the world's cases in our country. It is because you have not paid attention to women's health at all. So, at some point the hard understanding is solving the problem for a Tata Memorial is actually not solving a problem at all. I am making a doctor's life better, but I am not coping with the issue at all. And then the question gets asked, if I cannot if I should not solve it there, where am I solving it then? What is the solution for this? Just think of diabetes. If I don't want to have a huge number of diabetes cases, how should I do this? What is the best way for the government to solve the diabetes problem? What do you think? Yeah, but that assumes that you are already a patient. The government has a limited amount of money. So, diagnosis. Diagnosis when? But what is our thing in the country? Think of how you deal with the illness. You go to hospital when you already have an emergency. Till then you do not go. And this is, as I said, something which is a rural condition, which means very unlikely they will leave their farm or whatever and then go for a diagnosis. So, how do you deliver this? How do you deliver a solution? So, where do you deliver it? Do I deliver it at Tata Memorial, or do I have to do it in the village? So, early detection. There is no point waiting for this to develop as a disease. Why? We do not have enough doctors, we do not have enough hospitals. You will never, in a country this size, and by the way, remember another thing, they keep saying India is a young country, right? Well, in 30 years from now, our growth rates are dropping. In 30 years from now, we are an old country. And the US went from being a young country in 1970 to being an old country now, and healthcare costs went from being like 5% of GDP to 25% of GDP. And that is going to happen to us. We have less than 1% being spent on healthcare right now. In another 25-30 years, we are going to have at least 15% being spent on healthcare, because the entire population is going to grow old. People are sick. You need an ecosystem to cope with this. which means 15-20 years from now, if you are going to look at cervical cancer, there is no infrastructure available now to cope with the problem that will occur in 20 years from now. You cannot train enough doctors, you cannot set up enough hospitals. After several years, one Tata Memorial of course started in Mumbai, another one got created in Kolkata. There are two. Of course, there are private hospitals, but these people cannot afford private hospitals. So that's not a solution either. So the question got asked, can this be dealt at any level? And the only answer at this point was, come up with a way to screen in the village. That's the point you're making. So how do I do this? I've got to image and find out whether I can see a lesion. What is the evidence that there's a problem? Early evidence that there's a lesion forming. Okay. So just some statistics on this. Okay. It's a fully curable disease, by the way. That's the other thing. If I detect it early and give you some antiviral drug, the infection will go away. The current screening procedures that you will be taken to a public health center and inspected, if at all, 1% of the women are inspected, and then something is scribbled on a piece of paper and the record doesn't go anywhere. Nobody even looks at this record. The other solution is to take what's called a pap smear, which is where a piece of tissue is taken from the cervix, and you are familiar with what happens in a pathology lab. You take the tissue, put some reagents on it, keep it under a microscope, and somebody who trained will look at this under a microscope and then tell you this cell looks funny, that shape looks funny, therefore I think it's cancerous, and they give you an opinion, and then the doctors react to that pathology report. But in India, by the way, we might have around 5,000 competent pathologists, which means if I suddenly say let's take tissue samples from every woman and analyze this, I just don't have the pathologist to deal with that workload. So that also goes out. So now notice how I am broadening the problem. I am not looking at a narrow thing. I need to solve a problem. I am not looking at it in a narrow sense. I am asking what's the solution in a big picture, and I am not saying how do I solve this problem as a chemical engineer. How do I solve the problem, period, using whatever skill sets. Which skill sets I need and how to get those skill sets, you worry later. You don't start the problem by saying I am a chemical engineer and therefore what can I solve as a chemical engineer. And I will give you other examples of how that thinking can be bad. So we realized we need a way to image this, and all these devices are there in a Tata Memorial, they are not there in a village. Okay. So we said what's needed is a solution available on the spot. I'll just flip to this, and then it turns out there are lots of gadgets which will allow somebody to look at the cervix and capture an image and then say something that there's something funny there on the cervix. Okay, and they all cost at least 1 lakh. At least 1 lakh, several lakhs. There's some in our hospitals here in Dani Hospital, right opposite IIT, and so on. And if it's 1 lakh, would you ever take a device worth 1 lakh into a village? No. So that's another problem. So clearly there's a need for devices. These devices, whatever they, it's like an iPhone. Would you walk around with an iPhone in a village, or do you walk around with a Jio phone? So the 1 lakh phone versus the 2,000 rupee phone. Okay, what do you do? In fact, if you look at that solution, it's actually using a smartphone. It's built on top of a Samsung phone. So we went through a phase where we suddenly realized, guess who was sitting next to me? The guys who built a reactor. Mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, a software guy, because I needed a front end for my virtual lab. So I have a software engineer. And said, can we put together a solution which will solve this problem as a screening device? Okay. So nothing complicated. It's not a super complicated engineering challenge. It's not something I'm trained to do, but I realize there are people trained to do it. Now each person has a limited skill set. So no person is capable of doing the whole thing on their own, which is why it's not been done. But collectively, it turned out people had an idea, and that idea looked good enough that we said, let's try to see whether we can build together a prototype. So we went through a phase where we tried all kinds of things, including actually using our own phones to try to see whether we could do this. Finally, we built this. It took some while, but at this point, the other challenge was, who's going to fund this? This is not your standard, you go right to a DST or a DBT or an MHRD, they're not going to give you money for this. So here's the ironic thing, everyone says it's an important problem to solve, but nobody's going to give you money. And then you go and ask a corporate, would you actually give me a donation to solve a problem in a village? And immediately yes. So, in other words, one of the thought process, again we are so taught to go only to a DST or a DBT for funding, and we think as academics, we are trained as academics to operate a certain way, and you go to a totally different person and say, do you find value in what I am doing? And the answer is yes. And in fact, the kind of money they give me suddenly makes me stop and think, why am I writing to the government asking for a research grant when somebody is willing to give me 10 times more? But the catch is that person wants me to work on a socially relevant problem. And I want you to now get this thought into your heads. If you try to work on a socially relevant problem, the scale of funding available out there is orders of magnitude higher than what the government can give you. Because the government is not in the game of financing innovation. The government is in the game of being democratic about how it is spreading money across every college, across every faculty member, which means it is not backing ideas, it is just spreading it evenly across everybody. But if you had an idea and you go to somebody else and you say that I am actually trying to solve something local, I am talking about healthcare, it could be energy, it could be water, it could be transportation, it could be housing, it could be something right next to you, there is a problem right next to you, and you go and ask somebody, the kind of funding that is available right now is crazy. What we realize is there are investors trying to figure out what to invest on, and they are not happy with the fact that we are doing academic research a certain way. And we are about to see a paradigm change in funding in the country, where most of the money will come in through donations in this fashion and not necessarily through the government alone. Something else, when a company these days gives a donation, it does it through a route called CSR. You may have heard of it, corporate social responsibility. The mandate now is for if a company is profitable, it has got to give away 2% of its profits as charity. And if you are in government colleges, technically you qualify to receive a donation because you are a non-profit organization, and donations can only be given to non-profit. So, IIT Bombay is a non-profit organization. You get this money at this point. One of the nice things is it will come on time. Money has to be given out by March end, by the way. Has to be given on time because they have to declare the profits for a given financial year. Okay? And unlike the government, which can take 6 months to make up its mind as to who to give it to, and then another 6 months to release the money, money comes on time. So, for us, when we said we needed to build this, I did not go back to the government, I went back outside. It forced me to go and talk to more people to figure out who would give me money, not just colleagues, and which committee in a government agency might think of funding this. Okay. We build this. This is what an image would look like, and all we are trying to do is to magnify the cervix and look at it. Okay. An entire kit had to be created. This is what it actually looks like in practice. Okay. And these are cases of cervical cancer which have already been picked up using this device. So, one of the other things as a trick here is, again, comes from basic microbiology. If you stain tissue, and you might have seen this, for example, you wear a band-aid and you peel it off, the wounded area has a different shade or a color than the rest of your flesh. Do you see that? If you use vinegar or iodine on tissue, it highlights diseased tissue relative to normal tissue, and that is a simple trick, and you will find iodine in a village. Okay. So, it is iodine coated, and you can clearly see where there is a patch, where there is a tumor forming. So, at this point things escalated, and I want you to understand that we just went from one thing to another. We started getting pushed. Remember, this started with virtual labs. There is a team of engineers asking the question, what else can we build? And the magic here is a team of different skill sets sitting in the same room, okay, who otherwise would not have been sitting together, but for an event like virtual labs. They sit together, they build a device, somebody suddenly says the device is actually working. Next question, can you make 20 copies of it? Everyone wants it. So, we had to go find more funding for 20 copies, but at this point it has become easy. The moment a doctor says it is actually working, in fact doctors were willing to pay for this. Okay. So, I want you to appreciate that we are solving a relevant problem. We did not ask how to solve a problem as an incremental problem, how to incrementally improve on something. We actually broadened the scope and said, I am not locking this down to how will I solve it using chemical engineering. I will give you another example of chemical engineering versus thinking differently. I sit in a chemical engineering department with the title on the door on my lab saying protein engineering. So, protein engineering. I had the head of a blood bank come up to me and say, here's a great problem for you engineers, bioengineers. I know you build reactors. Can you think of a reactor with enzymes? I said, okay. What do you want me to do? You know that blood in a blood bank is stored as A, B, AB and O. There are 4 blood types. You have to be careful about who gets which blood type. There is a universal donor blood type. Which one is that? O. So the question was, is there a way to interconvert everything into O and keep it only as O? And that's at a certain level, that's a brilliant idea. Because if you have just O type blood, it's safe to give it to us. So let's say there's an emergency, an accident. You just give them O type blood and you're safe. So they have a lot of headaches in the operation of a blood bank, and that's his point. This is at a top hospital in Mumbai called Hinduja. So here's the thing, he is looking at me and saying, you're a chemical engineer, can you design an enzyme reactor to convert 1 unit of A type blood into O? So he wants some kind of cartridge, you inject 1 unit is a bag that you see, when you get your donations, blood donations, that bag. So 1 unit of blood, 400 ml of blood. So can you pump it in as A and it should come out as O? So he wants me to build a reactor. I said yes, and I looked through the biochemistry of it. There's an enzyme which actually does something which interconverts A to an O. So it's theoretically possible. My back of my head, I already know this is going to be a crazily expensive solution. It can be done, but for the moment it's an expensive solution. At this point, we stopped and asked the question of the team, how would you solve the problem? One guy gets up and says, it's the easiest thing in the world for me now to negotiate a cab. How do you negotiate a cab? You want a cab, you want a taxi ride home, Uber, Ola. How do you do this? Pick up a phone, you negotiate with a car driver whether you want to go that distance and at what fare. So this fellow is asking me, I'll pick up a phone, I'll negotiate with somebody else who has O type blood, who is somewhere in my area, and I'm even willing to pay him this much to come in and donate a unit of blood. What's the moral of the story? Instead of building my enzyme reactor at a very expensive cost per unit of blood, this guy found a way to get the same problem solved by just sourcing people with the right blood type and finding a way to get them and get them to the hospital. And it's an IT based solution, nothing to do with chemical engineering. Moral of story, if you say I'm only going to solve this problem using chemical engineering, I had to build my enzyme reactor. I would have built it and then found out much later, 3 years later, that nobody cared for my solution. So it is important early on to go talk to a larger group of people and ask whether there are alternate ways to do this. And sometimes fun things happen, okay, when you get in that kind of mode. So this I want you to appreciate that this has actually gone out, and the team which created it is on the verge of creating a company. We started somewhere, education, we're ending up somewhere else, healthcare. There's an intent to teach, there's an ability to make profit. It's about skills, it's about training. Okay. The previous bunch of slides I put up, I went through a certain process. I said, what did it take for us to actually get to the point where we could create a product which is commercially useful and successful? It took us first the ability to identify what the problem was, but then I needed skill sets. Where did these skill sets come? First, I got people who were trained to create simulators. Then I got people who were trained to create what? Gadgets, but gadgets for what? Not healthcare gadgets. These were gadgets for education. Why? Because it was so much easier for me as a chemical engineer to say, give me money, I'll build you some lab experiments. If I simply go as a chemical engineer and say, give me money, I'll build you a healthcare device, I would not have gotten this money 5 years ago. Give me money, I'll build healthcare experiments. Sorry, I'll build chemical engineering gadgets for the lab. But at this point, what I have is trained skills around me who are capable of doing much higher level things. And that's what you should be thinking about. Not how will you, in terms of a career, do everything on your own, but how will you create teams around you to try to do other things. Because you'll see you'll be able to do many more things. One by one, the other problems go away. How to get funding, how to get leave from your principal, all those questions you're asking before, all those will go away. If you're the guy responsible for bringing money into your department, notice the principal won't object if you're taking the 6th day off. So how do you do that? Okay, so I'll stop here. Maybe.
Something even about say Jaggery project.
Yeah. So
That is another completely different.
yeah. So one of the things is we have actually in the classical university structure, it's very hard for us to now suddenly talk to students about innovation like this because you are being taught a very systematic curriculum. So we're realizing that our curriculum itself has to change. We've created a Tata Center for Technology and Design, which is a virtual center here, and that's now allowing us to carry out these projects which are interdisciplinary, where I need a place where all kinds of backgrounds can come together and we can have a conversation. So my project that I talked about came up from that center. A second project is on jaggery manufacture. Jaggery, if you think about it, one of the issues with jaggery manufacture is that it is a what? It's a very small process run by individuals who have access to sugar cane. If you look at it from an energy perspective, it's an extremely inefficient process because you crush the cane juice, you keep it on this big pan, and then you just evaporate off a lot of water and you try to concentrate this down. And by the way, you don't know how to concentrate this, so there's one expert fellow who knows that precise moment when things start crystallizing out and you start forming jaggery. So there's somebody stirring it with one stick and you keep stirring it, and he knows the magic moment. There's no sensors there and so on. So again, virtual labs, if you think about it, we're talking about putting sensors and trying to figure out what's going on. So one of the insights here, the reason therefore this, if you think about sweeteners in the country, it's sugar. And anybody who talks nutrition will tell you jaggery is better at nutrition than sugar because all these other metals that are present are lost when you refine sugar. Okay, and yet while we use it in small amounts in home cooking, it's never become an industrial sector. And one of the reasons it's not become an industrial sector is because you have not learned how to manufacture it at scale. So how do you manufacture this at scale? At the core of it, you have to take what? You have to take something that somebody does on a pan, big pan, and now say how will you handle much larger volumes of it. But now I can't design an even bigger pan. That doesn't make sense. Okay. If you're going to remove water, it's at this point you can see a heat transfer problem. How do you efficiently design what? I mean, if you're doing this in a refinery, if you're going to Jamnagar, they've got such efficient heat transfer units designed for all the refinery operations they're doing. So if I can do it for a refinery for petrochemical manufacture, why can't I do that for jaggery? So the concepts are the same. The theoretical concepts are the same. One of the things you got to appreciate is can you reapply them for a different situation? So the challenge broadly becomes, can you take a certain volume of cane juice, literally pump it into some apparatus, evaporate it off, in other words a heat exchanger gets designed. Okay. By the time it comes out, you have jaggery. So while we are at it, how do you interconvert what is a batch process into a continuous process? And this is not a simple thing at this moment, because if you are now accumulating so much, you can see supply chain issues. Who is giving you that much cane juice for you to now do this larger process? Now you have to set up something upstream. You have to find an incentive for people to come up to you and give you their cane. It sets up interesting problems. I don't know if you know how cane is handled in the country. Okay, the night before the cane is cut, what the farmer does is flood the field with water. Why? Because the cane soaks up the water. Why are you getting the cane to soak up the water? Because you sell it by weight, you are increasing the weight. So a challenge, practical challenge, can you measure the sugar level in the cane juice? Because really you should be paying them for the sugar content of the cane, not the weight of the cane. That's a technical challenge. How do you measure sugar levels in the field? Biologist knows how to do it, but how do you do it with a gadget in the field? That's a simple gadget to build. It will turn out, if you start thinking about it, lots of interesting science to be done, engineering to be done, and there's a practical outcome.
And this project is being done with Technic Funded College.
And it's being done with a Technic Funded College in Sholapur. In Sholapur. So one of the things is IIT Bombay doesn't have sugarcane here. We don't have any sugarcane. So we need it in a place where there's a sugar mill. We need to understand how it runs in a sugar mill. So what we did was tie up with a college in Sholapur, right next to the Sholapur sugar mill, okay, and say use your students to actually implement the process and run it with some mentorship from us, but you prove the point that there's a solution there in terms of engineering for rollout of jaggery at a larger scale. And when you are done, by the way, okay, we'll help you with trying to work out an entire economics model, because somebody has to buy all that jaggery by the time you're done with it. And it turns out, if you look at all the big supermarket chains here, they're interested. Because for them it's quality control, right? You buy from one farmer, it's one quality, another farmer, it's a different quality. Now it's all going through one controlled manufacturing system, it's good quality jaggery. So how do you therefore not always, in this case, the irony is that college in Sholapur would have been talking about petrochemical process and courses after courses of petrochemical process, but there is no petrochemical industry there. When the same concepts could have been reapplied for this, and all they needed was a way to figure out how to kickstart and leverage finance to build some infrastructure on the ground to tackle a local problem, which involves the local sugar mills and local financing after that, because after this you can see what's going to happen. The sugar mills are interested in financing that college even more, because now they are starting to build locally relevant technology. So can you think in that mode? You're all coming from areas where there are lots of interesting problems. Some of them of industry origin, some of them are societal, environmental and so on. But somebody or the other is incentivized into wanting to deal with that problem. Somebody will pay you to clean up something. Somebody will pay you to build up something. What are these problems? So don't start with this attitude that, no, I'll only work on a chemical engineering problem. What is the problem? Because once you start thinking of the problem, you will find that a number of people can come together and collectively you are in a better position to bargain for resources, bargain for funding. That will subsidize everything else that you want to do.
So CSR funding is available these days.
Yes, I made a point.
We are in fact more interested in investing locally. See, a company that is close in Rajasthan would be interested in funding local projects that are helping local solutions, people around them, because they want to show that they are helping the community that is there. So if you combine the local needs and your ideas, you can come up with innovative solutions. Ultimately, tell me, what is doing PhD? It's being able to work on a problem independently, on a solution independently. See, that's what this is. There's so much around you if you are able to see it. Okay. Just say that, oh, why I'm not getting DBT funding? Why I'm not? But everything is not done by DBT funding. By DBT funding. So I know when Professor Mahajani started this project, he started out of his own interest. I want to help these people. This jaggery is literally a village industry. So how can I help them? So you see a problem next to you. Why worry about solving a multinational problem? There's a chemical engineering problem next to me, next to my door. Can I solve it? Resources will come.
I'll add one more point, which is the team which worked on the Gynecam. They've been at it now for around 4 years. It was the entire life cycle of building once, testing it in the field, coming back, testing it again, redesigning, and working out a commercial model for it. The team leader is somebody who has a BTech from IIT Bombay, a top student, went abroad, decided to come back and work on these problems. One of the negotiations that we had early on was that she would work on building this product and wanted to take it all the way. She was not interested in a degree. She has been with me for 4 years. In 4 years, you can get a PhD at IIT Bombay. So you have to ask, what is the relative value of a PhD? I've generated many PhDs, but none of them could do what she did. So why do you want that PhD? If it's just a certificate, fine, go for it. That's not a wrong reason necessarily, but ask yourself a hard question: what do you want? And if you've got some right reasons, and these are reasons which kind of resonate with our line of thought, we're glad to work with you guys and help you find ways forward. And the point that's been made to you throughout, and I heard it of course while you're in the corridor especially, what is being built is not a framework where one just lectures to you guys and so on. Okay, for the moment, yes, I'm technically lecturing to you, but I wanted to appreciate that there's a community there. So virtual labs, if you look at the evolution of this, it started from a rollout phase into a community. And in the community mode, I now listen. I don't tell people what to do. I listen to what people want. Okay, and I think the same can be said also for TechWib. We probably want to listen to what you guys want to do, and we react to that. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, so it gives me pleasure to introduce my colleague Professor Santosh Narona. He's from chemical engineering, and well, his core competence are, I would say, two. One is biochemical engineering and process systems engineering. So two things he works on. If you look at his academic profile, systems engineering as in control systems, data science, statistics, that is one kind of work, and the other kind of work is hardcore biochemical engineering, genetics and so on. But he has been working on this virtual labs projects now almost 8 years, 6 years, and this has really make a big difference. If you look at the way the whole thing has grown, so this is a government of MHRD initiative which started about 6-7 years back, and there are so many gadgets, so many virtual lab experiments, and an entire community has got developed. He has been the program in charge for IIT Bombay for the last so many years, and now he's taking it into a completely different mode. Like it's going to be a virtual lab Wikipedia. That's a completely different model. The other thing Professor Narona is very actively involved is with Tata Center. So what he presented here is one of the case studies of Tata Center, and then there are many such things that Tata Center is doing. And I am sure if you form teams and if you show interest, and there are now resources through TechWhip, you'll be very happy to provide guidance, mentoring for your efforts. So he has mentored many teams in healthcare. It is extremely difficult to get time from him. So there are so many teams working with him. It's amazing to see so many things happening in one small lab. That lab, if you go and see, well, you may not get to understand what biology is going on, but a number of people that are working in that lab is, I can't believe how he manages. He has vacated his office. He sits in one corner. So his office is now somebody is using as his or her own lab, and there is one small corner where one table like this where he is using it as his office. The entire place is just ours with it's just with activity. So it's fun to just visit his lab, and you feel invigorated. So and what is important is that he has been able to build teams and enthuse them, and if you can do that in your colleges, that will be really great. That is one of the things that we would like you to take away from his lecture. So Professor Narona, please give him a big hand.
So a very good evening, and this brings us to the last part of the workshop. First and foremost, I must, on behalf of both of us, Professor Sachin Patwardhan and myself, thank you for having participated in this workshop from the beginning to the end. Now, you will of course realize that we've been a little strict about attendance, and we've been a little strict about participation here for good reasons. I mean, we think that this is a very important part of what you are undergoing as your experience on the faculty, and we don't think that it should be taken lightly at all, because it is a unique experience, it's a very unique opportunity that you have, and you can't make the best of this unique opportunity if you don't take it seriously. Having said that, I must say that most of you have taken it seriously, and I believe you must have carried with you a lot of things that you will probably bring to reality in your own institutes. I would like to reiterate what you've been told more than once in this workshop, that in one of your institutions we are directly your mentors, and in the other one we are indirectly also mentors to you, because you are in the quality circle of IIT Bombay, and therefore for both of your institutions we are a part of the growth of your institution in TechWip 3. Now we are willing to do as much as you want us to do, or well, at least more than what you want us to do. We are willing to do as much as as is feasible for us, but to be able to make the best of our assistance and our participation, you have to come forward. Particularly you as TechWip 3 faculty, you have been told again and again that you are TechWip 3 faculty, and you have also been told more than once that you are actually in the midst of a very important opportunity, though I do understand that this appointment is unlike a more stable appointment and so on, which lasts for several decades. It is at your age a very unique opportunity to set your career going, if you make use of it in that way. So do make use of it in that way. I think this is the right time for you to, just probably some of you are just out of your PhD right now, some of you are we have just finished, have just completed your masters and probably aspire to do a PhD. So actually this would be an excellent opportunity to set foot upon a PhD, to find opportunities to carry out or begin research, and with the kind of facilities that you have with TechWip 3 in your institute, you have this wonderful opportunity not only of building your own career, but also building an institution. And you are not alone, you have a team with you to do it. This is it's very rare to have a committed people, a committed group of young people all driven to the upliftment of an institution. You see, otherwise, as Professor Kodke said, or as Professor Patwardhan said at some point, you would otherwise have a routine system where people join an institution and the institution hopes that they would work towards its welfare. But here by design you are working towards the welfare of the institution, your very appointment is for that purpose. So it is a very unique opportunity because all of you are automatically committed to this task of uplifting the institution, and when all of you are automatically committed to it, it has to happen with so much of young blood going into it. And then if you are a part of that young blood, believe me that there will be something waiting for you after you actually do what you are supposed to do. I am sure there will be something waiting for you which you might not have anticipated before, right. So when you do something with good intent and when you do something for a larger cause, nature also ensures that you get something or grow in the process. So that is the way nature works. Having said this, now a couple of announcements before I would also like to request Professor Patwardhan to say a few words at closing. There are a few things that you need to complete before you depart. One is that you will come and mark your attendance personally after we complete this concluding session. At that time you will hand over all the feedback material that you need to give us. One of them is a feedback form you have been given in the morning with some checklist and so on. The other is a one-page essay which I asked you to write yesterday, and the third is I think something which Professor Sethi had requested you to fill up. So there are three things which you need to hand over to me before you depart from here. After you hand those to me, I will allow you to sign, and only after I see a complete endorsement of your attendance will we not send your name to NPIU saying that you are a defaulter, right. So we should not, I believe that none of you should have an opportunity or should be marked out as defaulters, and therefore all of you will comply with this. However, if some of you do choose very specifically to not to do this, then we have no option but then to communicate to NPIU that there were certain defaulters in the process. Having said that, I will now hand over to Professor Patwardhan to conclude this.
Yeah, so Professor Gadre has very nicely said many things that I wanted to say. I'll just add a few things that, well, I think next 3 years, so this is just a beginning. This next 3 years we are going to work as a team, okay, and together we should see how programs in your colleges become better, and in turn you also grow with that, okay. Now just also think of this. You have attended, you have been part of many of these institutions, and probably when you went there, those institutions were very well developed, okay, and things were in place, you could just walk in and do your experiments. Okay, but somebody, before that, when the institutes began, somebody before that, did the hard work of building the institutions. Okay, so somebody did it for you to make an institution big, so you have to give it back. Okay, think of it like that. So when you now if you go to new IITs, okay, probably they are in the same situation. There is nothing. There are no labs. Okay, and the faculty who join have to do have to do things completely from scratch. Okay, so it's the same situation here. So you have an opportunity to build institution, and you will get experience of seeing how it happens. And this experience will be very, very valuable. Believe me. You can also it's fun to work with students. If you can motivate them, you start looking for problems. You start looking for ideas. You start developing virtual labs. Motivate students to do things. If you can build teams, make them do things, you can contribute. Not only to them, to yourself and to a bigger cause. So there are many such things that are possible. Okay, so don't look at IIT Bombay. The reason why we have thrown open many other things other than just the research and the standard things is that you should keep your eyes open and see that many things that are happening in IIT. Okay, and you can actually contribute in many ways. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and let's work together as a team. Okay, so that's the spirit you should take away from this workshop. And thank you for bearing with us. Well, I know that we have a really big problem in the hostels, and but we thought that it is, even though you have to pair and stay in the hostels, even then it's still nice to stay in the campus than staying outside in somewhere in Mumbai and spending 2 hours or 3 hours smelling the smoke outside, so and getting stuck somewhere. So but then so right now we couldn't arrange things like lab visits. Probably we just had a very short lab visit, but there'll be many more opportunities to visit IIT Bombay. Okay, so there are many schemes. I think Professor Khodke probably explained. So you should participate. You should if you do it collectively, if you form teams and do it and interact with us, we are open to that. We can form some forum by which we could interact and so on. We are also thinking about things like trying to set up Moodle in each of your institutes. Let's see, we can use funding at your end, also provide support from IIT. Okay, and particularly if computer science faculty take lead, then that will ease out things. And such a small things will change the atmosphere, where you share and where you do your teaching and so on. Okay, so we'll have things that we will suggest. Will be very open to your suggestions. You can come up with ideas. We'll try to see how we can accommodate them and do new things. Okay, so let's work as a team, and we hope to see you for next 3 years under different programs in TechWeb. So thank you.